Hey, law firm owners, here are 7 strategies that competing law firms don't want you to know about. Rich, why don't you kick us right into the first?
Hey, the first thing we want to talk about MPS is this idea of building an audience, right? So you and I have discussed this for years that the number one asset in a law firm is not their building, it's not their staff, it's not their legal prowess, it's their list and their relationship with their list. And in today's day and age, the new list is your audience. Not only do we have an internal CRM, email, and contact list, but now we have an audience. Back in the day, TV was the most powerful media, and that's going away. We all know that. Social media and the way that we're watching video and consuming information and entertainment is now happening on social media. And what we're able to do in this environment is actually build an audience by having them like, follow, subscribe, all comment, share, all the things that they do. And then that helps the algorithm do its job to show them more of the things that they like, especially your content, as well as that just make sure they're on your list. So anytime you post new content, they're receiving it. So this is how we build our audience that will start to know, like, and trust you. And this is what the winners, the rocket star law firms are doing. They're building an audience on social media that's allowing everything else that they do to get elevated. What do they say? High tide lifts all boats, right? Well, that's what this does. It creates a higher tide and it makes all of the other paid advertising they're doing work better. Does that make sense?
It does. And you brought up building a list, right? Building your audience, building your list. Well, one of the ways you build your list is through something called a lead magnet, right? You're able to use a lead magnet, which is the second strategy that competing law firms don't want you to know about, is they're using lead magnets. And lead magnets is something of value that you're offering your potential prospects to get them interested and get them onto your list, right? This can come in many different forms. It could be a book, it can be a podcast, it could be a mini course on something that you're a subject matter expert on in your practice area. It doesn't necessarily matter, but what does matter is that there's a clear perceived value to what this lead magnet is, enough for them to want to be interested enough to opt in and become part of your list and become part of your audience base. Would you agree with that?
I do, but Michael, tell me, why does the lead magnet work? Like, I just had a discussion with a law firm owner today that she said, well, why not just ask for the consultation? Like, why do I have to lead with the lead magnet? Why do lead magnets work better than just saying, if you need help, get a consultation? Do you know the difference and the reason why?
Yeah, well, it goes right back to what you just said, know, like, and trust. And through a lead magnet, your audience, this potential lead, can start to build relationship with you. So they're starting to pre-frame what the experience is going to be like with your firm, right? Because they're starting to establish that sense of trust. They got something of value, something that hopefully helped them out in the moment, and it started to establish that likeness and that trust, which will then set them up to be more likely to take the next step with you as a firm in whatever capacity that looks like. If that's booking a consultation, it's booking a consultation. It runs all the way through retaining the firm at some point because this trust has already been established of something of value that you provided them to begin with.
Yeah, it's a really good point. It bridges into our third conversation point here, which is the set rate or setting more of the qualified leads that you get into consultations. And so the idea of, if we go back to Michael's lead magnet argument, now we're building trust with our audience. We're also giving more people the opportunity to say yes to something that's a lighter yes than scheduling an appointment. So now they've raised their hand. They want your free lead magnet, but they haven't yet said they want to schedule an appointment. So now we have to measure how many of those qualified leads are scheduling an appointment. And what winning law firms do is they measure this. They know what their set rate is. And in order to know what their set rate is, the set rate is defined by the number of appointments that you set divided by the number of qualified leads that you receive for the same time period, which means you need to have two pieces of data for that time period. You need to have how many appointments did you set, and you need to know how many qualified leads did you receive. I can't tell you how many times I've met with law firms and I asked them how many leads that they have, and they went to their calendar and they counted up their appointments. And they didn't start counting a lead until it became an appointment. And if they didn't become an appointment, they didn't even count it. That's one of the areas that winning law firms succeed at over firms that seem to struggle. Do you agree with that, Michael?
I do. And obviously, it's one thing to get them to set an appointment, right? But now we actually have to get them to show up, which is the fourth aspect here. We've done all of this work, right? We've produced a high quality lead magnet. We've now gotten our data right. Now we know what our set rate is. We got them to set an appointment. Well, now it's show rate, right? It doesn't mean anything if we can't get that prospect to now show up. So going back to tracking, you have to be able to track what your show rate is. And to be clear, your show rate is how many people show up out of the appointments that were set, right? That's what your show rate is. And so now we're motivating people to show up and putting measures in place to show up. But the key here is that it's being tracked and inspected, right? Because without any tracking measures, we don't know what that number is. And thus we don't know whether it needs to be improved, changed, or stay exactly as it should be. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's all about that tracking. The winning law firms are tracking this data. Internally, we call it the perfect client lifecycle data. But the winning law firms that we see take off, it's such a simple concept. And by the way, I don't know, Michael, you tell me. This is where I think we lose some law firm owners, some attorneys, because they're intellectual, they're intelligent, they just think, why would something so rudimentary make such a huge difference? But it really does matter. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, whether you want to or not, those are the real numbers. And it's hard to make any true educated decisions about what you need to do in the practice if you don't have real numbers in front of you. It's the only way you're going to be able to continue to grow. So that way you know what levers to pull in the practice to influence that growth, right?
Yeah, like you said, data doesn't lie. I'll say it differently. Data doesn't lie, right? Okay, so that brings us to the next point, which is the hire rate. You probably should have taken this one because you're the in-house expert, but I'll see if I can tackle it. You can +1 if I miss anything. But generally speaking, this is measuring how well you're hiring. New consultations are retaining the firm as compared to the new consultations you meet with. So if you have an NPC, a new potential client that you meet with during an initial consultation, we call those ICs. We say to ourselves, okay, if I have 10 that are qualified, how many actually retain the firm? So the formula is number of clients who retain the firm divided by qualified new potential client meetings, which means anybody who's not qualified doesn't get counted in there, right? And so that's the hire rate. And so I know, and you and I both know, that law firms think that don't measure this. They think their hire rate is actually higher than it really is. Is that true?
Yes. On average, the true answer when we pull the numbers across all practice areas and firms that we've personally worked with is 33.7% the average starting hire rate. And many firms don't even recognize that because it wasn't being tracked, right? And so once we actually get the numbers, like you said, data doesn't lie, then we're able to identify there's a real opportunity there, right? And going with hire rate and set rate, I think you'd agree that one of the staples there that your competition uses is they have a system in place for both of those functions, right? It's not just flying by the seat of your pants on each of those.
Yeah, look, the competition doesn't want them to know this. And I suspect that when a law firm found out that they thought they were closing at 80% and realized they're actually closing at 33%, they might turn to day drinking. By the way, this is not a tall glass of bourbon. This is indeed iced tea. But I'm telling you that the fact remains that if you don't know what your number actually is, you can't properly set your guidance correctly. You don't have a compass that's telling you where to go. And your competitors who are trying to take cases from you don't want you to know these things. Trust me, I know, because the number one statement I get from my clients when I ask them for testimonials, they say, sure, I'll give you a testimonial, Rich, but please don't show it to somebody in my backyard. Right? Because they really secretly don't want somebody in their practice area, in their backyard, knowing all the things that they've learned through the years through this perfect client life cycle. And so I understand. Now, we have an unlimited supply mentality, right? We believe that there's plenty of business for everybody. But if you're going to be in business and you're going to be as profitable at the highest level you possibly can, you need to make sure you're paying attention to these things that other law firms that are winning are actually paying attention to. And many of them are indeed your competition. What's the next one, Michael?
Yeah, well, on the topic of making sure the competition doesn't see those reviews, referrals, right? So, Rich, why don't you tell them a little bit about referrals and how that's such a big impact for so many firms?
Yeah, so really the whole idea of referrals is we're measuring what is our referral rate. So like if you were a dental office, you would want like 2 referrals for every client. That's really what your ultimate number is. Law firms don't think like this. And they don't think like this for a reason because they're not a dental office and it's not about getting your teeth cleaned. It's about going through something traumatic, usually that people are going through that they need a law firm for. But law firms need to start measuring this information because the law firms that you're competing with that don't want you to know this, they're doing this. So they're measuring how many referrals they get as compared to how many clients retain the firm. So there's 2 extremes of this, right? So there's those law firms that get all their business by referrals and they don't advertise and they're kind of proud of that. Well, that's not what we're talking about here. Those law firms are fine, but that's not the firm we're discussing right now. What we're discussing is a law firm that advertises and markets using all the tools and techniques out there to advertise and market to generate leads, but measure what percentage of their business comes from referrals because they're serving the client very well. They're giving great client experience and they're building a culture of referrals on purpose. And so, yes, they're advertising, but yes, they're also looking to build referrals. We're never suggesting referrals isn't good. Referrals alone isn't great because it's not usually a sustainable market. And lead generation on its own isn't great because it's always too expensive. So what we want is a fine mix of both. And the only way to know how that fine mix is working is to make sure that you measure it. So you have to have a system in place to make sure you understand what is your rate of referrals as compared to the number of clients that actually retain your firm. Does that make sense, Michael?
It sure does. And that brings us to our last strategy here, which is so powerful. It's quality staff at a discount. And what we mean by this is we mean that we're not sacrificing the type of quality we're getting in a staff member, but we're finding it at a discount. And for us, that means broadening our horizons. That means for us going international, right? Leveraging international labor because international labor is extremely talented. But the benefit to a US based law firm is that you do get them at a bit of a fraction of what you would invest traditionally in the US for that same role. But you're not sacrificing the talent while doing so. So, Rich, why don't you talk to them a little bit more about that?
I want to plus one. You nailed it, right? A couple of things. One, there's a lot of myths out there that you just go hire somebody anywhere, the Philippines, South Africa, Central America, Mexico, whatever, and they can work from home and they're going to be a great employee. I will tell you, A-level employees are great employees from home. B-level employees can be okay, but oftentimes slip working from home, and C-level employees are terrible working from home. And so our experience is not having everybody work from home. Secondarily, the governments out there are starting to really clamp down on people having employees work from home and usurping taxes. They're not paying taxes, but they're still putting a burden on the medical system. And so now the employee either is getting in trouble with the government or doesn't have access to government services. And we're hearing stories of governments actually shutting down bank accounts for U.S. employers who are hiring in other countries without doing it the right way. So we believe in doing it the right way. We also believe that you should have your employees working in the office in most roles, right? In most roles, you should have your employees working in an office environment in that other country. So yes, the cost is a little bit higher, but there's still a significant difference, usually 30 to 40% depending on the job title of what you would normally cost you in the United States. But you do it right, you do it above board, you do it in a way that they're building community in the office, and now you can get a higher quality team member that's working towards the goals you want to work at a discounted price from what you're paying in the United States, which allows you to reinvest more of that money into growing the firm. And yes, you as the owner do get to keep some of that profit, but really what we're trying to do is create space to invest more money into the firm to grow the firm. And that's why your competitors don't want you to know about this, because they're happy with you employing the people in the United States at the top dollar amount, making less profitability and not being able to reinvest that profitability into growth for your firm.
Right. So look, those are the 7. If you guys agree with these 7 or you feel like we missed one, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. Make sure you comment down below. But as always, if you enjoy this, hit that like button and hit that subscribe or follow button, depending on the platform you're listening or watching on. We appreciate you. We hope this was helpful, and we'll see you on the next.